Did it pass or not?
I'm still working on that.
Oh, okay.
Go.
Go ahead and say something.
Testing, testing. Woo! Because we're standing by each other.
Since we're streaming, we're going to start right on time, 7 o'clock. I'll go up and adjust this microphone in just a minute. I just want to say thank you so much, Tricia.
You want me to turn this off?
Thank you so much, Tricia, for being here. And Dr. Markoff teaches at Western Carolina University. She was teaching over here and moved to higher education. And tonight's topic is exercise and brain health. I alluded to some of that a couple weeks ago, but I wanted Tricia to be more specific on it and give you more bullets to talk about for exercise. Let's just start with prayer. Father, we thank you so much for your watch care over us. Thank you that we can be here to learn more about one of your 8 natural remedies. Let this be meaningful for each of us here, I ask, in your holy name of Jesus. Amen. I'm going to hand this microphone around to any of you who want to ask a question. Please find me. I'll be sitting right here, but I'm going to go adjust this thing.
Well, hi, everybody. I say at my house that I live in a giant Jeopardy game. In other words, I'm always saying, what is, and Dave can usually answer it for me. But have you ever been at a dinner and you're all trying to remember somebody's name? Okay. So when I first saw a TED Talk by Wendy Suzuki about exercise and memory, I was like, okay, this is really relevant for me. And I think you will find this information incredibly interesting. I hope you do, because in fact, I'm just going to tell you this. I kind of went through it with Dave last night just to make sure I'd covered everything. And he said, that's it. When we go on vacation next week, we are not sitting the whole week on the beach and reading books. We're going to be moving around. And I'm like, okay, hold on. Let's not get carried away. So he found it to be particularly interesting, and I hope you do too. So this is a statement from 2020 from the American Psychological Association that says, a regular exercise routine can decrease the effects of stress on the body, so decrease the effects of stress, improve mental health and mood, and even enhance memory and cognition. Now, if exercise can do all of that, I'm all in. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. Let's talk about exercise and stress. And before we do, I want to talk about one of the stress pathways. So this is just showing you the hypothalamus secretes a hormone to the pituitary gland, which then in response secretes another hormone that targets the adrenal gland, which sits on top of your kidneys. And then then the adrenal glands secrete cortisol, which is one of the hormones that is secreted in response to stress. Now, if you have...
There's a pointer there if you want to use it.
Oh, okay. If you have a situation where all of a sudden a car pulls out in front of you and you have that surge of adrenaline or that surge of cortisol, you've probably experienced that feeling and then your heart rate goes up and you get sweaty and all those responses to stress that you have felt in acute stressful situations. And that's a good thing. We want to have that flight or fight response. But we don't want it all the time. And when we're under stress, right, then we have chronic secretion of these hormones that are only meant to be short term. And if you have chronic cortisol secretion, it can lead to a suppressed immune system, anxiety and depression, headaches, problems with digestion, heart disease, and weight gain. So clearly, chronic secretion of these stress hormones is not something that we want or desire. All right, another one of our hormones is epinephrine or adrenaline. And again, this is secreted, it's a good thing in response to acute stress, but it's not something that we want secreted long term because we can get damaged blood vessels and increased blood pressure. Again, we get increased risk of heart disease, some anxiety, weight gain again, headaches, and insomnia. So chronic secretion of the stress hormones clearly is not good. So here's the good news. Here's where exercise and stress comes in. And this is just in a nutshell. This is very basic. So with exercise, you get a reduction in those stress hormones, epinephrine or adrenaline and cortisol, and you get an increase in helpful hormones. And you may have heard of serotonin. Serotonin, it makes you feel good. Dopamine is your feel-good hormone. We're going to talk about endocannabinoids. You've probably heard of endorphins, and we're going to talk about BDNF. So we'll talk about those. Those are all very helpful hormones that actually increase as in response to exercise. So the negative goes down and the positive goes up. Now, here's the thing. I thought this was a very interesting study. This is a graph showing you unfit women and fit women. And this is cortisol secretion. And this is in response to a psychological stressor. So the same stressor, but we have fit and unfit women. And look what happens to the level of cortisol with unfit, inactive women. It's much higher. So what this is saying is that exercise helps modulate your response to stress by secreting less cortisol. Let's see if I gotta keep up. And as you get older, by the way, your response to stress in this HP, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland, that becomes more sensitive to stress. And so you respond with greater cortisol secretion. So the good news is with exercise, that age response to stress can be modulated or reduced. I thought that was an incredibly positive thing just in response to cortisol secretion and stress. All right, I'm sure, how many of you have heard of endorphins, right? So endorphins are generally associated with the runner's high. Have you ever heard of the runner's high? The endorphins are your feel-good hormones. And they are opioids, believe it or not, that produce feelings of euphoria and general well-being and calmness in response to external stimuli. They are also big pain inhibitors. And endorphins have been shown to increase in response to stress. And for a very long time, endorphins were actually credited for giving the runner's high. And the runner's high is just this, well, we'll talk about what the runner's high is in a little bit here. But there's some new research. So here we go. Let's enter this neurotransmitter endocannabinoids. it is believed now that these neurotransmitters are responsible for the feelings of euphoria rather than endorphins. And these endocannabinoids can reduce anxiety and pain perception, and they're actually in the family of cannabis. So, yeah, right? So, if any of you want the feeling of cannabis without cannabis, you can experience it through exercise, maybe. Not everybody experiences it. In fact, not all runners who run even in the range that it takes to secrete these endocannabinoids, only about 75% of runners actually experience the runner's high, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yes, and sad that not everybody experiences it. So here's a study. This was a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled human study. And they took 63, I should have put the person on the right first, 63 participants. They walked at a casual walking place on a treadmill for 45 minutes. And then they took those same participants at a different time, and they put them at a moderate intensity. So a moderate intensity is running at about maybe 60%, a little higher of your absolute max, all right? And on the average, the researchers found that the study participants that were exercising at their moderate intensity decreased anxiety after 45 minutes of running. Now, what's interesting is they actually put a blocker in there to block endorphins. So they knew that it was not due to endorphins. And then they can actually measure the level of these endocannabinoids, and this was one of the initial studies that showed that these chemicals are indeed responsible, they believe at this point, for the runner's high. And and can decrease anxiety and so forth. So there you go. So the runner's high depends on intensity. So it requires more like 45 minutes of moderately intense aerobic exercise, meaning you have an elevated heart rate, continuous elevated breathing. You should be able to talk but not sing. So that's good news for those of you who might want to run for 45 minutes, but you don't have to run. That's the good news. So this is how you might experience the runner's high, but you don't have to experience the runner's high. I just thought it was interesting information. All right, so we have decreased cortisol, we have decreased epinephrine, we have increased endorphins, increased endocannabinoids, and we also have increased serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine.
How would you define long-term?
Just repeat the question.
How long would you?
Tricia,
Okay, the question is how would I determine long-term exercise? Are you looking at this slide right here? Okay, that's a good question, but let me qualify that first. So what these two statements are trying to do is differentiate between you could go out and run, and right away they're going to show an increase in dopamine and serotonin. It may not last or hang around long, but with an acute exercise session, you're going to have a rise in these hormones, and then they're going to go down fairly rapidly, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, but it's not going to solve a long-term level of low dopamine. They're comparing that to long-term exercise, and the studies vary in that. Could be a month, could be 4 months, but when we get to depression and we start talking about that, what they have found with these longer-term studies, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the dopamine levels, they tend to stay up higher for over a long period of time so that you can sustain higher levels. But I will show you some studies on that. Does that answer your question? I'm trying to differentiate between, boop, you have an exercise, you have a little bit of dopamine, you feel good for a little while, and I'm in a regular exercise program, maybe for a month, 3 times a week, and I'm able to sustain higher levels of dopamine over a period of time, to the point where you don't experience depression, but we'll get to that. So dopamine is your feel-good hormone. It regulates motivation and reward and attention and memory. And serotonin is more for mood and emotion. All right, but I just want to say the last statement here is here are 11 trials published in depression and anxiety, and this study concluded that regular aerobic exercise, again, your heart rate is elevated, was an effective antidepressant intervention for adults diagnosed with major depression. Not just maybe all of us at some point experience some depressive symptoms, but these are people actually diagnosed with major depressive disorder.
Was that 45 minutes of regular aerobic exercise?
45 minutes? Well, that's 30 to 45 minutes is what would be considered. All right, so that's just a little bit on stress and exercise. Good news for your stress hormones, right? So let's talk about now exercise and mood. This was a study, it was actually a big, huge review study in brain plasticity. I'm sure you all get that regularly and read it. This was a 2017 study that just found that after 30 minutes of daily exercise, and this is for people with mild or moderate depression, they found that it may be effective for improving mood. People reported better mood with decreased tension, decreased depression, and less anger. So that's pretty straightforward. All right, so here's the interesting thing. Well, I'm going to come back to that. Here's another. This is just a small study of 26 young Japanese participants. Look, they only ran for 10 minutes on a treadmill at 50% of their VO2 max. That's your oxygen consumption. That's a way of measuring the level of intensity with running. So it was a moderate pace. And they found that both mood and executive function were enhanced. And they found increased activation in the prefrontal cortex, which is an area for mood regulation. Executive function is mental skills that include your working memory and flexible thinking and self-control, but this is what I like about it. It's being able to focus on a thought without, it says, strong internal predisposition or external lures. I love that. Have you ever had difficulty like focusing on something without, going off on tangents? So it's part of executive function. All right, so look at that. Super short term and it impacted mood. That's just one study, however, but here's a study that looked at well-being in miles walked. And as you can see, there's a trend. As the miles walked increased, then there was the well-being scores went up. Now, notice it starts as low as 1 to 10 miles per week and goes up to 20 miles a week, that there's kind of a dose response there. But 20 miles a week, that's doable. And it doesn't have to be 20 miles a week. It could be 10 miles a week. There's still an improvement in the sense of well-being. But people who exercised more were happier and coped better with life. So it doesn't take, here's a 2016 study. They found that with Iowa State University students, if they just walk for 12 minutes, it was a powerful mood lifter. And the study participants experienced feelings of self-assurance and joy and vigor. I mean, we can all walk for 12 minutes, right? Yes, come on now. Of course we can.
Tricia,
Yes.
I have a large hill I walk up and down to get to my mailbox. I always feel better when I get up to the top of the hill.
There you go.
And that's only 5 minutes.
There you go. There you go. Here's another point about exercise. When you compare walking in nature, which we are so blessed to live where we live, right? Compared to exercising in an urban setting. So they had 38 participants, no history of mental illness, and Stanford researchers found that walking for 90 minutes in a nature-like setting decreased rumination. All right. So rumination is the replaying of thoughts, and generally they're negative thoughts. And a lot of it happens when you get sad and when you can't stop thinking about your gloominess and what's causing it. So like a breakup or a layoff or a biting remark, and you play it over and over and over in your head, and rumination can lead to depression. So I'm sure some of you have woken up in the night, right? And had these negative thoughts it's like you can't stop it. Well, that's like ruminating. And as it says, it can lead to depression and anxiety. So I love that getting out in nature can decrease the risk of rumination. This is just a step program I threw in here. It was like when you get involved in a corporate exercise program. These were almost 2,000 participants from India and Australia, and they were challenged to do 10,000 steps for 100 days. And what they found in 100 days, a little more than 3 months, is that they had over 7% improvement in depressive symptoms, 5% improvement in anxious symptoms, 9% in their stress scores, and a little bit in their overall well-being. And the study said that 10,000 steps is not this magical number. Those who had half that amount still had improvement. But the mark that they used was 10,000 steps. And they felt that part of the success of this program was the social aspect of it, being part of a program, being motivated, talking with others about it. So there is definitely a social aspect involved with exercise as well, which we're going to talk about. All right, so it's been known for a while that exercise influences the same chemicals that antidepressants do. Antidepressants influence serotonin and other things like that. But no one had done like a head-to-head comparison of exercise versus antidepressants until researchers at Duke back in 1999, Blumenthal decided to do this SMILE study. And he randomly assigned 156 people older, ages 55 to 70, to 3 groups to test the effects of exercise versus medicine on depression. So we had group number 1, medicine only, group number 2, exercise only, group number 3, medicine plus exercise. After only 4 months, all 3 groups showed a statistically significant improvement in depression. Now, the medicine showed a more rapid response, but over time, this is interesting, after 6 months, the medicine group only, 52% relapsed back, and the exercise group only 30% relapsed back. So the long-term effectiveness of continued exercise literally brought people into remission from suffering from depression. And that was one of the first studies that was done. So that's a pretty powerful study showing the difference between exercise Interestingly enough, look at the combination group, 55% relapse. That was, they thought, kind of due to, they thought people were people knew they were going to participate in an exercise for depression, and when they weren't chosen just to do exercise, they're wondering if they were discouraged when they found out they would receive medication. Some people blamed the medication for the exercise not working like it should, and then they feel like maybe taking medication might have undercut the sense of self-mastery that exercise gives you. So just interesting psychological things that they think came into play with that. So, yes?
Wait. Here's the microphone.
Just to make sure I understand, they continued taking medicine. Mm-hmm. They continued exercising. They continued doing both. It's not like they stopped and then 6 months later. It's that they...
That is a good question, and I'm not...
that doesn't make any sense.
What doesn't?
That they continued.
No, the study was for... I wish I had my book with me. The study was for 4 months. And then I'm not sure after 4 months if they continued, but I can look. I actually have the resource with me.
Okay.
So I'll look. That's a good question. I will say that some people went into remission, literal remission from this, and the exercise only group, it's an orange book in my purse called Spark. Thank you, Gerard. The exercise only group, only 8% relapsed. But let me get the study and I'll go over it with you. That's a good question, and I'm drawing a...
Yeah, because it's discouraging to think that if you're continuing, that 6 months later you're going to go backwards.
No, that is not the case. And I'm going to have you look it up. I have the page, and you can share it with us. I have the page right here.
The other thing to consider is that the medicine may have to be changed, the dosage of it, and then they may not have been changing the doses.
Have her look at the smile right there, and then you can share it with us. All right, but I'm going to just move on, and we'll come back to that because that's a great question. So a 2023, that was 1999, so I thought I'm going to look at something a little more up to date here. Here's a 2023 meta-analysis that looked at 41 studies to determine the effectiveness of exercise on depression. And basically what they found out is that what they concluded is that aerobic and resistance training showed large positive effects. So, and they also supported the fact that supervised and group exercises are also very beneficial. And I think that's the social aspect of that. And also, I don't know, I go to the gym, and so you see the same people and you develop friendships, and so it makes you want to go. There's accountability. There is that extra social boost that you have, so, et cetera.
I was just wondering if you could clarify what a meta-analysis really is.
Well, I will make it super simple. A meta-analysis is just where they take a bunch of studies, they statistically analyze them all together to see if their findings are still statistically significant. So it's combining the results of many studies, and it strengthens. If they find it statistically significant, it's a very strong relationship. Do you want to add anything to that, Gerard? Okay. All right. All right, so I thought this was very interesting. So what type of exercise? I just mentioned resistive. I've been talking about aerobic. What type of exercise is most effective? And here's another meta-analysis that looked at 15 strong studies. They're randomized controlled trials. And this is for to see which type of exercise was most effective in treating depression for those over 65. And what they found is that mind-body, so mind-body meaning like yoga, tai chi, things where there's kind of a meditative component, aerobic and resistance exercises were all effective in reducing depressive symptoms. They also thought, based on this, that it's important to allow the exerciser to choose what they enjoy the most and what they're going to be the most consistent with, maybe what's the most readily available, maybe. So allowing the participant to choose might increase the ability for them to stick with it. And this was a study, how much exercise, how often, in Frontier in Psychiatry, and they looked at a whole bunch of studies to kind of determine what type of exercise was the most effective. They found aerobic exercise and mind-body, but they did not look at resistance exercises. So across the literature, resistance exercises also tend to be very much associated with a reduction in depression. A frequency of 3 to 5 sessions per week of moderate intensity, anywhere from 4 to 16 weeks. And again, group exercises were just recommended. It's not that there's anything special about them, it's just that it probably increases adherence and the social factor. All right, so just really briefly, I wanted to show you this. I thought this was a great study. Where did that go here? All right, this is a dose response. This is looking at major depression and depressive symptoms. And this is a large study, looked at 15 different studies. And the goal of this was to see if there's a dose response for exercise and depression. What I thought was really cool was this. Look what happens when you start to exercise. Look how the curve drops. And what that's saying is when you go from 0 to something, it has a huge impact on depression and depressive symptoms. So I thought, wow, that's really encouraging. Just do something, right? And you can have an impact on depressive symptoms. Adults that reached the recommended amount of 2.5 hours a week had 25% lower risk of depression compared to those with no activity. So again, when you go from 0 to something, that's when the impact is the most obvious. So I thought...
What I really like about that is you get most of the response in the first 0 to 10.
Exactly.
So all those are out there making me feel guilty because they're doing 20, 30, 50 miles. That's okay. I'm doing 5 or 10, and I'm getting just as much benefit.
Well,
maybe not as much.
I was going to say,
I'm getting enough benefit.
You are getting, it's a dose response, so you are getting positive results, absolutely.
Oh, wait.
Microphone, good. Tell us what you learned.
Let me wake up.
It's a little vague, but I think what he is saying, 6 months after the study,
Right.
Blumenthal and his colleagues surveyed patients to see how they were doing and found that exercise worked even better than medicine over the long term. About 30% of the exercise group remained depressed versus 52% of those on medication who remained depressed and 55% for those in the combined treatment group.
So it's a little vague.
That sounds, yeah, it is. It's almost like it was 48% effective versus 70% effective. In other words, you have a group of 100 taking medication, and 52 of them are going to still be depressed after taking the medication.
Well,
it sounded
let's not get too, the bottom line from that study is exercise was more effective than medication, and it was more effective than medication and exercise. I don't know where the cutoff point was.
He said, well, what it said was after the initial 4-month trial, the subjects were free to seek treatment or not, however they chose.
Okay, so it was for the first 4 months, and then they followed up later. Okay, thank you.
I'll take them both.
All right, so what's responsible for the reduction in depressive symptoms? I'm just going to go over this pretty rapidly, but psychological factors are responsible. Exercise can improve self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. It can increase your quality of sleep. So you all know that when you're sleeping better, you feel better. And when you're tired, what does that do to you mentally? A lot. It improves life satisfaction. And patients may seek social support, which decreases loneliness. So there's just psychosocial factors that are involved with exercise. And then again, I already talked about the increase in neurotransmitters. So dopamine improves your mood and your feeling of wellness. Serotonin improves mood and self-esteem. It primes the hippocampus, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, which is central for learning. And it reduces stress by counteracting that cortisol. And then norepinephrine can improve self-esteem, and we'll talk about BDNF in a little bit, brain-derived neurotropic factor. In fact, I think that's my next slide, so let's see. Yes. All right, so this is super exciting stuff. This is BDNF that really wasn't studied very much, maybe till around 1990. I could be wrong on that. But this is a key molecule in the brain that is engaged in learning and memory. And so, you know, as we age, I was saying our memories are like, at least for me, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I know my memory is terrible. So, what is it? It's a neurotrophic factor that is responsible for actually neuron generation and survival. So, and can help the neurons survive stress. It was discovered in the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain directly involved in learning. And there are so many studies out there showing that physical activity increases the production of this molecule. And with the increase of BDNF, there are actually new neurons that grow, all right, which we didn't know before actually happens, but in some parts of the brain it does. They can grow in the hippocampus, which is the part where mood and learning are regulated and memory. And they did a study where they had individuals ages 65 to 75 exercise. And then right after that, they did a little cognitive training, and then they tested their cognitive function. And the effects of exercise enhanced their thinking. So they think that's from partly the circulating BDNF that increases with exercise. So I don't know about you, but when I heard that I can actually grow the part of my brain that has to do with memory and learning, I'm like, get up and go, right? I mean, come on, that is powerful stuff, right? By the way, those BDNF levels tend to decrease with age. So this is a potential route. Not only that, it increases connections or synaptic activity between the neurons. So there's better firing in our brain. So that's good news. Yeah, right?
Could you speak to the level of exercise, 65?
Again, it doesn't take a lot. a half hour. In fact, I may have some studies, but it doesn't take a lot. There are so many studies out there with varying levels of exercise. The bottom line is move. Just move. All right, so now let's talk about cognition, thinking, learning, exercise and cognition. Let's see what we have here. I just wanted to show you this study because I thought it was interesting. They took undergraduate students, literally in a class. They had two groups. Group 1 jogged for 15 minutes at moderate intensity. Group 2 participated in concentration and relaxation exercise. This is for 15 minutes. The exercise group had a significant improvement in cognitive tests following that jog, and significant improvement in feelings of perceived vigor. What was really interesting to me is the group that didn't exercise actually felt more tired and had less vigor and less energy. So to me, the news is when you're trying to get something mentally done and you're just not able to process, 15 minutes of moving around can increase your perceived feelings of vigor and your cognition. Just moving.
How do you measure the perceived feelings?
They have pencil tests that they do. The question was, how do you measure perceived feelings? They literally circled, how do you feel on different tests.
That's the person's judgment?
Yes, it's their judgment. Yeah. But that's what matters, right, is how you feel. You're the only one that can really say how you're feeling.
And that's compared to the same people who did the relaxation.
No, different people. It was a different group.
But the people who did the relaxation also did the
Yes.
perceived feelings of vigor and energy.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can determine there's an improvement.
Well, what it says is between the two groups, the group who exercise, when you compared the results of the energy and vigor test, those who moved for 15 minutes had higher energy and vigor compared to those who didn't. Correct. Yeah.
When you're using the word move as an exercise, is that walking, running,
Yes.
or just moving?
It's really just moving. And I'll even show you a study that they found even light housework can be beneficial. So just moving. Yeah, these people happen to jog. Now, let's not forget too, though, moving is great, but when you get your heart rate up, you're also benefiting your cardiorespiratory system. So I'm all for getting your heart rate up because then you're benefiting lots of things, right? But I'm just encouraging you to move. And that, yeah. Here's this is showing you that, again, it's another big meta-analysis. And this was just showing that a single bout of exercise had a small positive effect on cognitive performance. So it looked at lots of studies, single bouts of exercise had a positive effect on your ability, your cognitive, whatever test they happen to give. There are lots of different tests.
Tricia, yeah, we used to always recommend 30 minutes 3 to 5 times a
Yeah.
week. But that 30 minutes doesn't have to be continuous. It could be 10 minutes,
Yeah.
3 times, or 15 minutes, 4 times. If you don't do math, you can still get 30 minutes.
Yeah. And that is the recommended amount of exercise is 150 minutes of exercise a week. And you're right. You could do that all in 2 days on the weekend if you wanted to, or you could break it up into 10-minute segments. So those are the current recommendations. And those are the current recommendations really for brain health as well. They really don't differ significantly. I just wanted to show you that there was a conclusion by the Health and Human Services for Physical Activity Guidelines, and their conclusion was, based on looking at a bunch of different articles, that there is moderate to strong support. that physical activity benefits cognitive function, both during early years, we're talking children, and late periods in life, in healthy populations, and in populations with cognitive deficits. So it's beneficial for people who even have some dementia. So that's good news. I threw this in here. This is a Finnish study because it was a 4-year randomized controlled trial, which is a strong type of study. And they looked at several different things. They looked at resistance exercise, aerobic exercise, then they combined resistance exercise with diet, aerobic exercise with diet, and they had a control group. So a very, very strong study. They found that only the aerobic exercise and diet group showed a significant trend in improved global cognition. That's just overall cognition at the 4-year mark. Now, I thought that's odd. But what the researchers thought, remember this is Finland. They already had a relatively healthy diet. They were already quite active at baseline. So it's very possible that their healthy lifestyle masked the benefits that we might find in the United States, given that we have less activity and overall in the United States, a less healthy diet. I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, this is incredible information on dementia. And let's see, I got to catch up here. All right, so this study looked at the steps walked daily. I'm missing, hang on one second here. My graph didn't come up, but anyway, steps walked daily. They looked at how many steps were walked daily and the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease in a lot of people, 78,000 people, over 7 years. And they found that dementia decreased as the numbers of steps walked daily went up. So there you go. When you're looking for as little of exercise as possible, remember that those getting about 3,800 steps had 25% less dementia, but those getting 9,000 steps had 51% less dementia. And those walking more rapidly even had further reductions in dementia. That's powerful stuff, right?
Tricia, I had a colleague in California who had a business putting patients on a treadmill. And he traveled around to different doctor's offices with his treadmill and provided exercise EKGs for these patients. He found that those individuals who came in with dementia opened up after 30, 45 minutes on the treadmill, and the family could come in and have a life-ending conversation with their mom or their dad, where before, laying in the bed or in a unit, they weren't able to have this conversation.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. This is from the Cooper Aerobic Research Center, and this is a study, a large study, as you can see. And everybody took a treadmill fitness test. They were followed for 17 years. That's a long time, so strong study. 164 deaths from dementia. But they found that fit persons had only half the risk of dementia as compared to low-fit individuals. And for every MET, and that's just a way of measuring how much energy has been expended, increase in aerobic fitness, so for every MET, the certain measurement, mortality from dementia fell by 14%. If that doesn't get you up and walking, I don't know. That's pretty powerful stuff we're talking about there. If I could tell you that half your dementia risk would go down by half, how many of you would go out and walk every day, right? I mean, none of us want to suffer from dementia. Here's a British study, almost 500,000 study participants, followed for 10 years. Those involved in frequent, vigorous exercise. I like this because even housework, just moving again, had a lower risk of developing. And look at the last statement. That held true even for those with a family history of dementia. So that's pretty powerful. You're not going to be able to read this, but I'm just going to tell you what this is showing you is on the left, it's showing you sedentary behavior. And for those who have greater than 8 hours per day of sedentary behavior, so sitting around, driving, using the computer, sitting at a desk, their risk of dementia went up by 25% compared to people who had that, compared to those who were physically active. So if they were inactive for 5 to 8 hours per day, their risk of dementia went up by 7%. So you can see just by increasing activity level, walking around instead of watching television or sitting at your computer for 3 hours, raking or doing other things, significantly decreases the risk of dementia.
Any studies where you combine the aerobic with the strength training?
I'm sure there are because,
Can you repeat the question?
yes, the question is, are there studies showing where a combination of aerobic and strength training? I'm quite confident there are. I am a huge fan of resistance and aerobic, especially as you get older because you lose muscle mass with aging. And to retain that muscle mass, that's your metabolically active tissue. So yes, I cannot pull a study out of a hat, but I know it's there. I'm confident.
Tricia?
Yes.
20 years ago, when we called it the sitting disease, the sedentary behavior, we called it the sitting disease. And at that point in time, it was more harmful than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I'm not suggesting you smoke cigarettes. I'm just suggesting we don't have the sitting disease.
Yeah. They would call it sitting, they called it sitting is the new smoking.
That's right. And that's
Yeah.
why I started standing at my office 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Standing in front of my desk and in front of the computer. I still do it at home, and now my back hurts, but there's other issues.
Here's another study just looking at exercise and Alzheimer's disease. This is Alzheimer's disease. So it was a prospective study, meaning following over time, moving forward. In the Seattle region, 1,700 essentially healthy people ages 65 for 6.2 years. Persons exercising 3 or more times per week had 38% decreased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease compared to those getting little. And I have a little graph here, but for whatever reason, the graphs aren't showing up. But that's okay. I'm just telling you, exercise is good 3+ times a week, 38% decrease. That's huge. I keep forgetting my little clicker. Now, look at this. Here's a study from Mayo Clinic Proceedings, and they looked at over 2,000 adults from 2 different studies in Germany. The study showed that high cardiorespiratory fitness was related to an increase in gray matter of your brain volume. And this is just another step toward understanding the relationship between physical activity and cognitive decline. So you can build your brain, not only gray matter, but you can increase white matter, and as I said, the connections between the neurons are enhanced. Here's another study in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. It looked at 10,000 brains, and those who engaged in exercise, even modest amounts, here we have only 4,000 steps per day, had increased volume in areas of the brain responsible for learning and memory. So yay, because there's my memory again, and that's the hippocampal volume and part of the prefrontal cortex. So there it is, hippocampus volume as well as increased gray and white matter.
I had a neurologist at school tell me that we never forget anything. We just can't recall it all the time. And knowing about this BNDF,
BDNF.
BDNF, we didn't study that when I was at Loma Linda. That's powerful.
Yeah.
We can actually
Yeah.
add neurons
Yeah.
so that we can recall everything that's there. When we do.
This is just showing you the hippocampus. It's the purple area there and the part of the brain. I thought maybe you'd like to know what we're talking about. As people age, so 60 and up, the hippocampus starts to lose 1 to 2% of its volume, and this annually, which affects our memory. But many, many, many animal studies, if you start researching this, across the board, show that there is an increase in hippocampal volume with exercise. And in human studies that have lasted longer than 6 months, this one particular study did show an increase in left hippocampal volume. So the human studies are still coming, but they're very positive so far. So stay tuned when you start seeing things about BDNF and hippocampal volume. This is what we're talking about. All right, so this is very exciting because if we know that we're losing 1 to 2% of our hippocampal volume, look at this study. Researchers studied 120 men and women ages 55 to 80. Half did brisk walking, so 40 minutes. There you go for a number, 3 times a week. The other half did stretching exercises. And after a year, the control showed a 1.4% shrinkage of the brain hippocampus. Just like I said, with age, it shrinks. But the walkers showed a 2% increase in brain size as measured by MRI. And they had higher levels of BDNF, which stimulates new brain cell growth. So that age decline in the hippocampus, this study shows that you can counteract that with as little as 3 times a week, 40 minutes exercise. Now, again, this is one study, but that's exciting news, right? I mean, woo! All right, so this is a story about Ben Levinson. He started exercising at age 90 because he was depressed, he couldn't walk well, and he was frail. He started strength training and started working up to 20 minutes a day. And at 103, he set a world record for men over 100 at the Senior Olympics. So it's never too late, never too late. So again, I just want to conclude with the statement that a regular exercise routine can decrease the effects of stress on the body. It can improve your mental health and mood and even enhance memory and cognition. Perhaps even we know that there could be growth in your brain that would counteract that decline that you get with aging. So incredibly encouraging things on exercise in the brain. And I would just encourage you to not focus on amount, but just to get out every day and move, even if it's for 10 minutes. And work up. If you can get your 150 minutes a week, that would be the ultimate goal that you could do. So I just encourage you to move. Any questions?
I noticed you had one for early morning or in nature particularly, and that's what's effective for me. Is there any evidence? Because I like to get up at sunrise and walk and see the things come to life. The birds are starting to sing, especially in the spring, and to watch the sunrise, maybe even see the moon set. I mean, to me, that is very invigorating.
Right, and that has not only, I think that is the impact of exercise, it's also like a spiritual time. It's just, it boosts in so many ways. And I would say for you, because you are a morning person, then that helps carry you throughout the day. But not everybody is a morning person, and so I would say whatever works for you. Find that time that you can regularly put that into your day, or whenever you can squeeze it in. Find social support if that's what will help you, but whatever works for you. Yeah. I'm a morning person too. I like to get it done, and I enjoy that fresh, cool air and the birds singing. It's wonderful.
One other thing, I want to just reaffirm what you have told us tonight about the exercise. Because someone very close to me, when we came here, there were a couple of surgeries which helped, but we were able to walk around the block, and we would go over to the wellness center, and she would work 20 minutes on the new step, and I would be doing weights and things like that while she was doing that. But this really helped. But she has, as the medical problem that she has began to develop, and I had to start using the wheelchair to get her up there, that just deteriorated. And now that she's bedfast, it's all falling apart. But I could tell when everything was active and going, her mind was good. But it is bad news now. So I just want to affirm what you told us.
Good testimony, yeah. Movement, as much as we can move. And we know that when you're in bed, lying, how things do start. Your body, your muscle tone, everything starts to deteriorate. So I'd like to close with prayer. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your questions and listening. And let's pray. Dear Jesus, wow, we are just wonderfully made, and what a miracle, really, we are. And Lord, just help us to treasure the fact that we can move, and that this is a gift that you have given us. And just give us the desire and the motivation and the courage to move so that we can maximize our health. And as we maximize our health, I pray that it impacts us spiritually and physically and socially, and that just we can maximize and be the person that you want us to be and desire for us to be. So Lord, thank you for the gift of exercise. And I just pray that you be with us and guide us and encourage us to move toward a healthier lifestyle. Be with everyone as they leave here tonight. Keep them safe as they travel. In your precious name, amen.